The memorial service was everything Dad would have wanted: simple, elegant, and overlooking the ocean he loved so much. The gentle sound of waves provided a soothing backdrop as friends and family gathered to share their memories of him. Everything was peaceful until my mother-in-law Margaret stood up, smoothed her designer dress, and dropped the bomb that would shatter the solemnity of the occasion. "Before we conclude," she announced in her practiced socialite voice, "I have something important to share. Thomas promised me his beach house before he passed. Olivia, dear," she turned to face me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "I'll need the keys by the end of the week." The assembled guests collectively held their breath. I could feel my husband James tense beside me, but I remained calm. Carefully, I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Really, Margaret? Then perhaps you can explain this document Dad left with his lawyer yesterday? The story of how we got to this moment is quite something. I'm Olivia Carter, 35 years old, and my relationship with my mother-in-law Margaret has always been complicated. From the day I married her precious son James 6 years ago, she made it clear that I wasn't the caliber of wife she'd envisioned for him. But what happened in the weeks leading up to Dad's death would reveal just how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. It all started 3 months ago when Dad called me over for one of our regular Sunday morning coffee chats. These meetings had become our tradition ever since Mom passed away 5 years ago. Dad and I would sit on his deck overlooking the Pacific, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. James usually joined us, but that particular Sunday, he had an emergency at the hospital where he worked as a surgeon. Dad seemed different that morning. His usual energetic demeanor was subdued, and he kept looking out at the ocean as if searching for something in the distance. "Liv," he said finally, using his special nickname for me, "there's something I need to tell you." He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "The doctors found something in my last scan. It's not good." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What do you mean, Dad? What did they find?" He reached over and took my hand, his grip still strong despite everything. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They're giving me 3 months, maybe 4 if we're lucky." The world seemed to stop. Dad had always been the picture of health, swimming every morning, maintaining his garden, staying active in the community. How could this be happening? "There must be treatment options," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Dad squeezed my hand. "There are, but the doctors say it would only buy a few more weeks at best. I've thought about it, Liv, and I want to spend whatever time I have left enjoying life, not sick from chemotherapy." I nodded, understanding but hating every word. Then Dad said something that would prove crucial in the weeks to come. "There's something else we need to discuss: the house. This house, this beautiful beachfront property, had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it with his own hands, and Dad had maintained it meticulously over the years. It was more than just a house, it was our family's heart and soul. Margaret came to see me last week," Dad continued, his expression darkening slightly. "She had some interesting suggestions about the property." I felt my stomach clench. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had always coveted this house. She'd made countless comments over the years about how it would make the perfect summer retreat for her social circle. "What kind of suggestions?" I asked, though I already had a pretty good idea. "She thinks I should sell it to her before." He trailed off, then continued. "She says she'll give me a fair price so I can enjoy my remaining time without worry about property maintenance." He made air quotes with his fingers, something he only did when he was annoyed. "But Dad, this house is your life. And you certainly don't need money." He smiled that wise smile I'd grown up with. "No, I don't. And I have other plans for this place. But Liv, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens in the next few months, whatever Margaret says or does, trust that I know what I'm doing." I promised, not fully understanding then what he meant. Over the next few weeks, things began to make more sense as Margaret's true colors showed through in increasingly obvious ways. First came the casual visits, always when she knew Dad would be alone. She'd bring expensive wines, despite knowing Dad didn't drink, gourmet foods, and endless stories about her friends who'd just love to see the house maintained properly. Then came the offers, each one more generous than the last, but all carefully structured to give her immediate possession of the property. She even went so far as to bring a real estate agent one day, unannounced, to just get a professional opinion on the value. What Margaret didn't know was that Dad was documenting everything. Every visit, every offer, every manipulative comment was carefully noted in his journal. He also made recordings of several conversations where she made thinly veiled threats about making things difficult for James and me if she didn't get her way. "Your son's position at the hospital board is quite prestigious," she'd said one day, her voice dripping with false concern. "It would be a shame if anything affected that." Dad played me that recording the next day, his face grim. "She's getting desperate," he said. "But don't worry, I've got it all handled." 2 weeks before he passed, Dad asked me to drive him to his lawyer's office. He was having more difficulty moving around by then, but he insisted on making the trip. "Mr. Mitchell needs to witness something important," was all he would say. I waited in the reception area while Dad spent over an hour with his lawyer. When he came out, he looked tired but satisfied. "Now everything's in place," he said cryptically. The day before Dad died, he called me to his bedside. James was there too, holding his hand as Dad's breathing became more labored. "Remember what I said about trusting me," he whispered to me. "Mitchell has everything you'll need. Don't let Margaret's games shake you." Those were among his last words to me. He passed peacefully in his sleep that night with James and me by his side. Margaret arrived the next morning, already talking about arrangements for the house. Which brings us back to the memorial service and Margaret's shocking announcement. As I held up the sealed envelope, I could see the confidence in her eyes falter slightly. "What document?" she demanded, her voice slightly higher than usual. "Dad's final will," I replied calmly, "dated and witnessed just 2 weeks ago." Mr. Mitchell, Dad's lawyer, stood up from his seat in the back row. "Perhaps this would be a good time to read Thomas's last wishes," he suggested, taking the envelope from my hands. What happened next would forever change our family dynamics. Mr. Mitchell cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Thomas Edward Bennett, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament." The next few minutes were filled with standard legal language, but then came the part about the beach house. Margaret leaned forward in her seat, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Regarding my primary residence at 1847 Ocean View Drive," Mr. Mitchell continued, "I have given careful consideration to its future ownership. Recent events have made it clear to me that this property, which has been in my family for 3 generations, must be protected from those who would use it for personal gain rather than preserving its legacy." Margaret's face began to pale as Mr. Mitchell read on. "I hereby establish the Bennett Family Trust, with my daughter-in-law Olivia Carter as primary trustee. The beach house is to be maintained as a family property, with strict provisions against its sale or commercial use. Additionally, I am attaching to this will a detailed record of attempts made by Margaret Winchester to pressure me into selling her the property during my final illness." The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. "Furthermore," Mr. Mitchell continued, "I have included audio recordings and written documentation of threats made against my son James's career, should her demands not be met. These materials have been copied to the hospital board as well, to ensure no retribution can be taken against him." James squeezed my hand, and I could see a mix of shock and relief on his face. He'd had no idea about his mother's threats regarding his position at the hospital. But Dad wasn't finished. The will had one final twist. "To Margaret Winchester, I leave the following message. Your attempts to manipulate a dying man for personal gain have revealed your true character. The house you so desperately wanted will now become something you would have never allowed, a place of healing for others." Mr. Mitchell paused before reading the final provision. "The Bennett Family Trust will operate the property as a retreat for families of cancer patients, providing them a peaceful place to spend precious time together during their challenging journeys. This program will be named in honor of my late wife, Elizabeth Bennet, who always saw this house as a place of love and healing. Margaret stood up abruptly, her face now an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous. He promised me. We had an agreement. Do you have this alleged agreement in writing? Mr. Mitchell asked calmly. Well, no, but... Then I suggest you carefully consider your next actions, Mrs. Winchester. The documentation Mr. Bennet provided about your attempts to pressure him is quite extensive. Any challenge to this will would make that information public record. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. Margaret's reputation in her social circles meant everything to her, and she knew it would be destroyed if people learned how she had tried to manipulate a dying man. Without another word, she grabbed her designer purse and stormed out of the memorial service, leaving a wake of whispers behind her. In the days that followed, James and I began the process of setting up the retreat program. The first family arrived 2 months later, a young mother with terminal breast cancer, her husband, and their 2 small children. Watching them enjoy the beach, hearing their laughter mix with the sound of the waves, I knew Dad had made the right decision. Margaret, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated from her social circle as rumors of her behavior spread despite our discretion. She made several attempts to reconcile with James, but her apologies always seemed to circle back to the house somehow. I just think the property could be better utilized, she said during one such attempt. Think of the maintenance costs for running it as a retreat. Wouldn't it be better to... James cut her off mid-sentence. Mom, enough. Dad made his wishes clear, and they're being honored. Either accept that or accept that you won't be part of our lives. Took another year before Margaret finally seemed to understand that the house would never be hers. She began making small attempts at genuine reconciliation, first with James, then hesitantly with me. She even volunteered to help with some of the retreat families, though I suspect that was more about maintaining her social standing than actual altruism. Today, 3 years after Dad's passing, the Elizabeth Bennet Family Retreat has hosted over 100 families. The guest book is filled with messages of gratitude and hope. Children's laughter echoes through the halls, just as it did when I was young, and the garden Dad loved so much continues to bloom. Sometimes on quiet mornings I sit on the deck with my coffee just like I used to do with Dad. The ocean still sparkles the same way, and I can almost hear his voice carried on the breeze. Trust that I know what I'm doing. He did know. He turned what could have been an ugly family battle into a legacy of healing and hope. Margaret still makes the occasional comment about the wasted potential of the property, but she's learned to do it quietly and less frequently. The framed copy of Dad's will hangs in the retreat's main hallway, alongside photos of the families who found peace here. Serves as a reminder that sometimes the best revenge against selfishness is to transform it into something beautiful. The beach house remains, as it always was, a place of love and healing, just not in the way Margaret had planned. And every time I see a family making memories on this beach, I know Dad is somewhere, smiling at how it all turned out.